Hey everyone, welcome back. Today I would like to talk about how to avoid being rug pulled by private equity and how my previous group changed the deal for me before I was about to buy in and how you can avoid this same headache. Let's get right into it. Being rug pulled is a term that became popular with cryptocurrency, meaning that the majority stakeholders sold out all of a sudden, trying to cash out, leaving with the rest of everyone else basically with worthless shares. Private equity has been a hot topic lately, and you can't escape it. I think there's a couple industries you could work for. One, you could work for yourself. Two, you could work for a group that is about to be bought out by private equity. Three, you could work for a group that already is bought out by private equity. Or four, a large institution. First, I'll tell you about my story on how the deal changed right before I was going to buy in, and the buy-in went from like 30,000 to 75,000 right when it came time to buy into the group. Now, I love all my previous coworkers, so this is nothing negative against them. This is just a lesson to say, be careful when you sign one of these contracts. My previous contract stated that after 2 years of employment, I would be eligible to be considered for a buy-in, depending on if the current board agreed to let me buy in and at the current valuation of whatever they were valuing the company at. There's a lot in there that is a gotcha kind of phrase, but basically they're picking the valuation. They're picking eventually if I'm going to be able to buy in or not. And there's no agreed upon dollar amount. When I was hired with this group, there were a lot of other docs that were hired with this group. And then guess what? All of a sudden, we were making more money for the group. And then by the time it came time to buy in, the group was much more valuable. And that sweat equity that I helped earn wasn't even considered. The cost of buying in was like 2.5 times of what I was originally verbally told. Now, that wasn't the main reason why I left, but at the same time, that was part of the reason why I left the previous group. Now that I own my own business, I think it's important to figure out, if you're not going to go the private practice route and own your own group, how can you avoid having the rug pulled out from under you at the last second and someone else buying all those shares or ownership of the business? All right, so how to spot a group that is ripe for PE involvement. You're looking at a small to medium-sized group, usually 1-10 locations, something like that. Basically, a lot of room for continued growth. If they're already the biggest group in town, private equity is probably not going to buy into a group that already has all the market share, unless maybe it's to get national better rates. Now, this isn't always the rule, 1-10 locations, but if the group is growing and it's a small to moderately small group, 1-10 locations, there's a good chance that eventually that owner is going to look at cashing out, and cashing out by either selling completely to someone else or getting private equity involved to grow even bigger. The next one is if there's a single owner, it's privately held, and if that doctor is probably older than about 50 years old, that's right for a private equity takeover. Third one, private equity buying all the other competition in town. Not a good sign that there's a reason they're either coming for you next or there's a reason they're not coming for you next. Maybe the business is so poorly run that they have no desire to actually gobble up that practice. The final one kind of goes along with the previous point, but it's basically you're the last remaining independent practice in your city. So even if you're a hospitalist group, for example, if all the other hospitalist groups are owned and you're the last independent one, you're probably going to stay independent for a while. It's only a matter of time before the owners want to get some sort of cash out from it. So I would be extra cautious when you go into being employed by one of these groups, knowing that they might pull the rug out from you right before you're set to be a partner. All right, so how can you avoid being rug pulled? Number one, do your due diligence. Basically, learn about the ownership. Who actually is on the board of directors, if that's available? Who's the lead of the practice? What does ownership of that group look like? And I think if it's a small group, talk to them about what is their vision like for the future. Step number two is totally understand your employment agreement. There were a lot of verbal things that were said to me. This is probably going to be the buy-in price, but when it came time to actually put it to paper, guess what? All of a sudden things changed when I was set to buy into the practice. Understand the language that is in your contract and how it gives the employer wiggle room to potentially get out of giving you shares whenever it comes time for you to buy in. Number three, look for transparency. The more transparent a group is, the quicker they answer your questions, and the more direct they answer your questions, that's a really good response. If the group is not being totally transparent with replying to you, I would say that's not a red flag, but I would be extra cautious. Hire an attorney to go over your contract. If you don't understand what the contract fully says and what kind of risk you are exposed to, make sure you have someone review the contract. Understand the risk that you're getting into. If there's no well-defined rules or metrics in your contract, then understand that they can screw you. If it's not explicitly stated in your contract, it's not a promise. It's all just kind of hearsay. Now, I'm not a lawyer, so could you potentially in your state sue them for verbal things that they said to you that are not written and then they change it for you last second? Maybe, but you're going to spend a lot of money going after that. And how much benefit are you really going to get? I don't know. That's completely up to you. But that sounds like many years of headaches and a lot of money before you get any of the outcome you were hoping for. If the employer won't change that agreement, meaning if they won't write it in writing, if you hit, let's say, 2.2 times your salary within that 2 years of employment, and then if you do that, you're eligible at buying in at X amount of price. If they won't put specific language in there, then you need to fight for it. And if they won't do that, then you need to adjust accordingly, because there's a chance that you could start working for them, you could continue working for them right before you're set to buy in. Private equity could buy up all those shares, and guess what? You now all of a sudden have to buy at either a much higher valuation, if you can buy in at all. What would I have done different looking back now? Well, I picked up a lot of extra shifts with my old group, thinking that my hard work would be rewarded working within this own group. Looking back, I think I would have rather probably picked up extra shifts doing locums and making a lot more money. Yes, it would have been more of a headache. Yes, I would have had to drive further away, but I thought that the goodwill that I was giving to the company was going to be rewarded at the very end, and it turns out that wasn't really the case in terms of my buy-in offer agreement. One thing that I think you could potentially ask for, you obviously could get turned down, but is a right of refusal. So you could have the first right of refusal of those shares. Let's say, for example, that the employer is not willing to write that we're going to definitely sell you at this price. Well, you could say, hey, all right, but if you sell within 6 months of me becoming partner to anyone else or any private equity, I want the same deal essentially, or I want a discounted deal on that shares. If they're not willing to write a contract like that, well, that might just be their prerogative, but they also may be shopping for some kind of sale and they don't want to pigeonhole themselves into selling to you for a lower price. In business, everything's a negotiation. Be careful when you go into these contracts because you just might get screwed over. Hope you all have a good day. See y'all next time.